The desert stretched endlessly beneath a blazing sun, the kind of sun that burned the land until it cracked and sent shimmering waves of heat into the horizon. And on that day, a lone cowboy rode across the barren trail with nothing but the sound of his horse's hooves breaking the silence. He was a man shaped by the wild, his shoulders broad from years of labor, his eyes sharp from endless nights, spent watching stars that never promised him anything, his soul scarred from battles with both men and life itself. His hat cast a shadow over his face, his jaw was firm, and though his hands looked rough and calloused, there was something deep inside him that had not yet died. A heart that still remembered what mercy felt like. He rode with no destination, or perhaps every destination, because men like him never told the world where they were headed. The wind carried dust in spirals across the ground, and for miles there was nothing but silence until he saw her. She sat on the side of the road, broken, fragile, as if the world itself had forgotten she existed. Her clothes were little more than rags, torn and dirt-stained, hanging from her thin frame like a cruel reminder of what she had lost. Her hair was tangled, her skin burned by sun and hunger, and her eyes were hollow, the kind of hollow that comes when a person has been abandoned too many times, when they have stopped believing that kindness can still exist. She hugged her arms around herself, as if shielding her soul from the cruelty of the world. Though no fabric, no shield, no wall had ever been enough to protect her from what life had done. The cowboy slowed his horse, his gaze lingering on her for a moment, but instinct told him to keep going. Strangers and their troubles were not his burden, and in the Wild West, helping the wrong person could be a death sentence. So he pressed on, the horse's hooves kicking up more dust, but his heart betrayed him. Something deep inside whispered that he had already seen too much to ride away. He pulled the reins sharply. The stallion reared slightly, and dust swirled around him like smoke from a gunfight. He turned back. The woman lifted her head, her lips cracked, her expression a mixture of fear and disbelief. She wasn't used to men stopping, wasn't used to anyone turning back. And then, in a voice low and rough but carrying the weight of something more than casual words, the cowboy asked, "You want a ring or a ride?" The silence that followed was heavier than the desert heat. She blinked, stunned, because the question was not just about marriage or escape. It was about choice, dignity, and the chance to start again. Her throat tightened, her hands trembled, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Finally she whispered, "Why? Why would you offer me either?" The cowboy's eyes softened, though they carried storms of their own. "Because," he said, his voice steady, "no one deserves to be left in the dust." He extended his hand, rough and calloused, but steady and sure, the kind of hand that promised both strength and safety. She hesitated, her mind screaming with doubt, but her heart wanted to believe. Slowly, trembling, she placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, safety. With his help, she climbed onto the horse, her frail body pressed against his back, clutching his coat with shaking fingers. The horse moved forward again, faster, its hooves pounding the earth, as if carrying them away from everything that had ever hurt her. The wind rushed against her face. The horizon stretched endlessly before her, and with each mile she felt her chains breaking, her past fading, her soul breathing. She closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against the cowboy's back. And for the first time in years, she dared to dream that maybe fate had not abandoned her after all. He said nothing more, yet his silence spoke volumes, as though he was telling her that the road ahead would not be easy, that danger and hardship still waited, but together they could fight it. The desert no longer felt like a graveyard of broken dreams, but like the beginning of a new chapter. And so, beneath a merciless sun on a lonely road, a story was born, a story of a cowboy who turned back when others would have ridden away, and a woman in rags who found, not pity but dignity, strength, and the spark of love that even the harshest winds could not extinguish. The road stretched on, winding through valleys of dust and canyons carved by time, and with every mile the woman felt both fear and hope wrestling inside her. She clung to the cowboy's coat, her heart pounding against his back, wondering if she had just stepped into salvation or another kind of doom. Yet there was something steady about him, something in the way he held the reins with confidence, the way his shoulders never slouched, that made her want to trust. As the sun began to sink low, painting the horizon with fire and blood, they reached the edge of a small town, the kind of place where saloons, hummed with whispers, and lawmen struggled to keep order. The cowboy dismounted first, his boots crunching on gravel, then reached up and helped her down as though she was fragile glass. Curious eyes turned toward them, men leaning against posts, women peering from windows because a stranger bringing a ragged woman into town was enough to stir tongues. But the cowboy ignored them, his hand firm around hers as he led her toward the inn. That night, for the first time in what felt like forever, she slept in a bed, and though the sheets were rough and the pillow thin, she cried softly into it because it was more comfort than she had known in years. The cowboy sat awake by the window, hat pulled low, watching the shadows, because he knew the world was never kind to the weak, and that danger was always a breath away. Away, he had enemies, every cowboy did, and helping her meant painting a target on both their backs. But when dawn came and the light bathed her face in gold, he saw something that made the risk worth it. She looked alive again. Days turned into weeks, and with every sunrise she grew stronger, her cheeks filling with color, her eyes beginning to shine with the faintest spark of hope. The townsfolk whispered. Some said she was a burden, others said she was lucky. But none could deny the way the cowboy stood by her unflinching. He taught her to ride, her hands shaking at first but growing steady under his guidance. He showed her how to fire a pistol, her finger trembling on the trigger until she hit her first target and smiled, for the first time in years. Together they worked on the small patch of land he had claimed, fixing fences, tending cattle, living a life built from sweat and stubbornness. And as the season shifted, so did their hearts. One evening, under a sky filled with stars brighter than lantern light, she asked him again, "Why me? You could have kept riding that day." He looked at her, his gaze holding hers like a promise, and said, "Because I saw myself in you. I know what it's like to be left behind." She felt her chest tighten, tears burning her eyes, and in that moment she realized his offer had never been charity, it had been destiny. But the Wild West was not a place where peace lasted. Trouble came like it always did, in the form of outlaws who rode into town, rough men who recognized the cowboy and wanted revenge for an old score. They mocked the woman, called her worthless, tried to drag her past back into the open. But the cowboy stood tall, his hand steady on his gun, and she, standing at his side, raised the pistol he had taught her to use. Together they faced the danger not as two broken souls but as partners, strong and unyielding. Shots rang out, dust filled the air, and when the echoes faded, it was the outlaws who lay beaten. The town spoke of it for months. The woman once in rags now standing as fierce as any frontier queen, and the cowboy who had given her not just safety but strength. In time, he kept his word from that first day. One morning, under the wide blue sky, he knelt in the dirt with nothing fancy, no gold or jewels, just a simple silver band, and asked her again, not as a stranger but as a man who had fought every battle by her side, "Do you want the ring?" Her tears fell freely as she whispered, "I already took the ride and it brought me here. Now I'll take the ring." Their wedding wasn't grand, just a circle of townsfolk, the sound of wind, and the endless prairie, but it was truer than any ceremony in a church of stone. Together they built a life where scars became stories, where loneliness became love, where the past no longer haunted but taught them how to stand taller. And so the legend lived on, of a cowboy who rode past a woman in rags, then turned back and with that single choice changed both their